Hello, good evening, welcome wherever and whenever you're watching this to the Whitechapel Gallery. My name is Gareth Evans, I'm the adjunct moving image curator here at the gallery, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you to this new first-time experience for me, perhaps for you as well, certainly in relation to the Whitechapel Gallery's moving image programme. We're in a live, hybrid, blended live stream event, lots of options there to choose from as to which experience you're currently having, but wherever you are, it's a very great pleasure to welcome you to this new testing ground for moving image programmes and the events attached to them here at Whitechapel. We're delighted shortly to be introducing two wonderful guests who will talk you through a fascinating conversation around the current film showing on the Whitechapel Gallery website on Akka's Shore until tomorrow, that's Friday the 2nd of July at midday. Please do find the film if you haven't already seen it, and particularly after this conversation, follow it up and watch it again, because it will make obviously even more sense to you having heard the wonderful filmmaker in conversation about it. Now, as I said, this is a new development, of course, given the extraordinary situation we find ourselves in globally. We're testing out here a live conversation in the Zilka Auditorium here at Whitechapel Gallery, and we are live streaming it to you directly, of course, on the Whitechapel Gallery's YouTube and event pages. Many, many thanks for being with us, and do stay with us, of course, as we take the programme through into the unknown future, into the summer and onwards into the autumn, varying how we approach, of course, our programmes, some online, some live, some in a blended environment. All information, of course, as always, will be on the Whitechapel website and all the other attendant social media platforms that you will know about. Now, as I said, this is a very special event for us. We're delighted that our wonderful guests are the trial test participants in this new hybrid environment that I've been talking about. And they are Umama Hamido and Andrea Luka Zimmerman. Umama is the filmmaker of On Akka's Shore, the film that we have been enjoying over the last week. And she will be in conversation with Andrea, herself a filmmaker, about the film, about the life experience behind it, and about the context in which it sits now, of course. It's a real pleasure to welcome her very shortly, along with Andrea. But huge thanks, of course, to the technical team behind this live stream. Ralph, Chris, Sam, my colleagues in public programmes, Jane and Richard, everyone else at the gallery, of course, for making this event and the whole series possible. Thank you very much to all of them. Thank you for being with us. And do remember, of course, that these events are coming to you free of charge at this point. Donation, of course, is encouraged. Please do find ways to support the gallery in whichever way you can, of course. We need to go forward into the unknown with these events, and we want to continue to bring them to you at the highest possible standard. So all support is appreciated, as always. Now, please do welcome Umama and Andrea. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Gareth. And I'm so privileged to be here with you, Umama, because I love the film so much. When I first saw it, I remember I was like, oh my God, this film is so beautiful on all sorts of different layers of it. I can talk about it for a long time, and some of that will come out in our conversation. So I wanted to ask you, the first question is like, how did this project come about for you?
Yes. I think it all started when I met my friend Jazz here in London. We knew each other from back home, from Lebanon. He's Palestinian, from a Palestinian refugee camp in the suburbs of Beirut called Burj al, and I'm from Beirut. I remember I came to study at Goldsmith here, and he contacted me, and that was the beginning of our conversation. So in a way, the film is about our meeting and the conversation we had about being here and thinking about back home.
Which are the big questions, right?
Like yes.
Being here on what is back home, and also what is the place, and how do we belong to a place as a body? And I think a lot of these questions are explored through the work.
Yeah.
So why is it important to make this film now, do you think? Like how is it?
Well, when I started making the film, it felt really urgent. Yeah, I just felt like I really needed to document what I was witnessing and living at the time. So of course, it has a lot about like, I mean, there's so many layers, but one of it is the Palestinian struggle, and that's where Jazz come from his family come from Akka, and that's why the film is called On Akka's Shore. So in a way about that and about our lived experience in relation to that, because I don't think our situation is really separated from what happened in the past. So I was really interested in myself in understanding our lived experience in relation, yeah.
I mean, this entanglement between a life lived fully in relationship to global politics, and in particular to politics which are so determining the possibility and impossibility of lives lived.
Yes.
You know, there's this kind of really, I guess there's these structures that are very, very much determining how one is allowed to move through a space, and how one is allowed to dream and be a full human being.
And the whole world is divided like that. Some people can move, some people cannot move, and you know, so where we come from, it matters, and it's about accessibility and many other things, yeah.
So when you decided to make this film, I mean, there's a particular approach you took in the making of this film, and I think it would be really beautiful if you could just talk a little bit about how you started the whole process.
Yes. I think I had a feeling at the beginning. I didn't know, you know, of course, what the film is about, but I could see something. And I remember I spoke to Jazz. I said, would you be okay for me to start filming us? And of course, he's a performer, he's a poet, he's a rapper. So he loves camera, and he said yes, of course. And I didn't know what exactly it's gonna be about, but I have a sense of, you know, I need to document things, and I particularly loved listening to Jazz because the way he speaks about the Palestinian struggle, and he has real knowledge about, you know, so many stories in the Palestinian refugee camp, and of course, we would speak about the whole nostalgia and just being separated, and you can't go there, and your whole image about everything that happened is, you kind of start seeing things from afar. And I was, just learning also about, it's kind of, we met in a way that we really couldn't meet in Beirut as well. There was so many things that we couldn't speak about, and suddenly we found ourselves in this big new city, you know, and everything was mysterious and exciting and scary at the same time. So I would listen to him a lot, and because he's a poet, and he was, at that phase, he was speaking a lot about back home, and it's like, you know, remembering things. And for example, he used to tell me lots of stories. He used to sit with people, so many people in the Palestinian refugee camp, and listen to what happened during the war, and during, you know, when the camp was under siege during the Lebanese civil war. So for me, I was learning about different experience of the city, because my family had a different, you know, relationship with the war. And even though I come, you know, from a very pro-Palestinian background, because also Lebanon is divided, and I thought of the Palestinian struggle always like is part of my own identity, because I really don't recognize the borders between Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Jordan. My grandfather is from Syria. But still, when I was listening to all these stories, I was learning about a whole new world, and still we were in the same place. So that's what attracted me most at the beginning, and I started recording our conversations. So we would just be sitting, you know, chilling at home, and I would leave the sound recorder on for hours. I didn't want any performance. I wanted to be just as it is real. So because if you come and say and ask someone questions, you know, they will think about it. So I had so many hours of sound recording, and then and I don't like to look at things when I record, so I just record live and leave it. And then I had a camera like that I bought in Lebanon, also in a funny way because I didn't have money. And so I used that camera. So I used to go around London. Yeah, discovering London, walking, filming, and I loved filming on bridges a lot, next to the water, and yeah, other things.
But I think like when you watch the film, there's this there's a particular eye and a kind of a gentle probing that allows for all the deep questions to be asked. I was really drawn to that kind of. There was a, I don't even like, because it's so overused, the word tenderness, but there was a searching that was fragile. It was very fragile, like a human life almost, you know, like trying to ask, and when Jazz was asking the question about like, who do I have to be? Do I have to marry an Israeli in order to understand my place within this place? I get really drawn to these questions that human beings would always try and find a way to be able to live outside of this, regardless of the
Because it's all absurd if you think about it, really. I mean, it's really absurd, so...
But your strategies of making, so on the one hand you were recording a lot, and on the other hand you were filming a lot. But you're filming also in a particular way. You're not. It's not an expository film, I think, for those people who have not yet seen the film. So it's not like you are interviewing and somebody is speaking to camera, but you did it really differently. So
it's like, I felt like, it's like I'm, in a way, hiding or like kind of wanting to... Yeah, I don't know. And
but the birds, like I remember there's like a long shot of the birds.
well, that's the whole story as well with the seagulls, because Jazz has a certain kind of relationship with the seagulls. So he, communicating with the seagulls and all kind of stuff, and I really get obsessed with them as well. And so, and I remember like even my first, you know, experiences of that time in London, for me, like the sound of the seagulls get so much related to the whole experience, because it was like the seagulls parallel to the whole journey. And I used the sound of the seagulls also in the film. And yeah.
Lastly, just about the formal aspect, because I was so drawn to that. So, and then you have a lot of shots of hands. Then they're doing things while something else happens with the sound. Then there are shots of the emptiness or darkness. So they're it's very impressionistic. Like it's like a montage and a collage that produces another meaning, which I think is so beautiful. And
it's like dark and light, because the whole journey is dark and light as well. I'm going through whole dark and light. And I also remember, like, I really saw Jazz as a... I mean, of course, also when I say so Jazz, because I've also created a certain character. So yes, it's Jazz, but it's also my own image of how I want to portray this, because there's many ways of how you talk about the subject. So I kind of saw him like a ghost in the city, and as someone who's watching and who's got superpowers and who is able to do many things. So when I filmed him as well, I didn't want to... I was just following my instinct. I didn't think much, but it was like I had to film him as a ghost. Yeah.
He has such a beautiful eye, and like your approach to filming, I feel like it's very, very particular. And I also wanted to ask you, because you used yourself in the film, you appear too, and what were the considerations? Like, how did you...
Well, at the beginning, I really didn't see myself at all in the film. So that came also through time, the whole narrative, how it developed, because... so I was like obsessed with understanding the whole situation of Jazz and history, and my focus was on that. But later, I thought like it's impossible. I cannot separate myself, and because it's also both our journey. So later, I felt compelled to be included, and also it felt fair, because I'm presenting Jazz's story, and I'm part of it as well.
But what's interesting about it is because you're part of it through a glass, again with water, and there's a lot of water, and there's a lot of rain, and there's a lot of not being able to see directly. So it's like also about discovering like another life with your own life.
That scene is also I overlaid from footage I shot in Beirut from my window, and then the other one was in London in the shower.
So it's a kind of memory making through the material.
Yes.
Like or remembering through the material as well as memory.
Yes, there's even the scene of the car, which is in Beirut. So it's like I'm looking at from behind the glass.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, in a way we've addressed this a little bit, but like what made you want to tell this story at that time in particular, and now, like, yeah.
Well, I was very angry at the time. And
Angry why?
Because I guess we were both stuck in a way, and I found myself here. I don't know about so many injustices. I mean, the whole thing with the film is that it's very personal, and I was maybe telling you before, like I found it. I'm still like learning to navigate how, because it's very personal. So you kind of how to find the language to talk about things.
I mean, I think this is because it's such a personal work and such a personal film, yet at the same time, the film speaks to an audience that is understanding it on all sorts of different levels, right?
Yes.
And now what we have to do is almost what we're doing here is like, and what you're doing in relationship to this conversation is also like learning to articulate it in another way, and it's a kind of rehearsal for remembering, right? Like a rehearsal of memory.
Yes. Angry. Well, because I guess when you are born with a certain passport or coming from a certain place, you might get, have to face issues that maybe other people don't face. And that, of course, we are part of this whole world that is now moving through that. And part of my anger is, at the time, I couldn't understand why do I have to go through all this stuff, and for a very simple thing, really. And why do you need to be separated? And how can you ask protection from the same place that really all like contributed or caused all your trouble? And all these things that really made me want to say something, and also because often, like, mostly our stories are told by others. So I wanted for us, because I was just seeing this thing, and I wanted so much to preserve things and to say something. And art, I think, is the best way, for me at least. I mean, if I think about the time of the film, it was darkness, but then the way to go through these things was to really make something out of it and to be able to turn it into something beautiful. Otherwise, life is unbearable, I feel.
There's something John Berger used to say, which is that he would make work or like artwork which are political but with a small p, because the big politics are the way in which we inhabit, I guess, the world. And through art, we don't make work that is rhetorical or that is polemical. And your work is really avoiding that. Like, your work is very poetic, but it's still deeply embodied. I sense, like, when I watch it, and I feel these questions of things that don't make sense, that just don't make sense, but at the same time are claiming to friendship and entanglement and like the unknowing as well, like the finding together through language, but also through the stumbling across language in a way, being clumsy in language. I feel like in that film it's really very strong and beautiful, and so I feel like, I mean, What were the challenges making that film?
The challenges were because the film is not again separated from the life circumstances that was made around it. So I think one of the biggest challenges for me was how to articulate all these challenges that were happening in a poetic way and in a, somehow like transcending, and how to talk about them really, like, for example, mental health issues, and is one of them. Yeah, how not to like because the way that, like, people deal with mental health issues is that mostly they deal with the symptoms, but and I mean, as in when society or even like the mental health institution, but no one wants to really understand or like deal with why things happen, because there's not much time, or because, but that's why I don't think they're separated. So that was one of the biggest challenge for me. Yeah, how to talk about these issues through the poetic. And also because I think I come from a culture where it's really hard to talk about vulnerability. And I mean, for me, the film in a way is a confrontation first with myself. Like, I needed to do this to process what happened. And because I also believed in jazz story so much. Not because it's jazz, but because it's a story of really many people. And Palestine is not only Palestine, there's many Palestinians around the world. And I could relate to jazz because, again, I said, like, I'm come from very pro-Palestinian, but I never really understood what displacement really meant until I myself came to England. And yes, and I couldn't go back. So I understand what does it mean to be separated or from home. So yeah, I guess all these things, how to really talk about these things and process them.
I mean, I think that there often, like within mainstream culture, there are certain tropes which are representing people in a certain way, representing issues in a certain way, and through the poetic, I guess. But your particular approach also is, in a way, opening up a space for that which we cannot fix, which we cannot even know about each other. There's like, the unknowable about somebody is perhaps that which we know then the deepest, I guess.
Exactly, is to go into the core and see the roots of the trouble. Yeah.
But also knowing that we don't really fully know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's like I was just seeing many things, and I needed to. It's like a painting, the whole film, and yeah, what to reveal and what not to reveal, because it's much. The film is just like things, but the truth or the reality was a lot, and that was also another challenge, is like, how can you pick up the elements and what to say and what not to say? And so maybe that's what's art. Otherwise, you would just go give a lecture and say, okay, this is,
Exactly.
That's another way of treating things as well. Yeah.
So I think, I mean, that brings me almost, but before we go into the how was it constructed and the editing and the kind of whole thing, it's like, can you just talk a little bit about how the title came about?
Well, yeah, it's on Akka's shore, and Jazz is from his grandfather. They were expelled, his family, in 1948 from Akka to Lebanon. What I was talking about?
The title.
The title, yes. So, yeah, it just made. Oh, yeah, and Jazz, like, I remember in these days, Jazz would always fantasize about dreaming, going back to Akka. Because he's Palestinian and they can't go, as you know, going back to his city. And he always, of course, told me about all the history of Akka and Ahmad Bash Al Jazzar, because he's from Al Jazzar family, and so he belongs to, I forgot this, like, leaders of Akka. So, and then he wants to go back to Akka, smoke a joint on the beach, and eat fish. It's a special dish, fish with rice, sayadi, and yeah, just listen to music and chill there, drink a beer as well. So that was the dream, and so I was like, okay, we have to call it on Akka's shore.
And it's kind of really, it's such a simple dream, and yet it's so far away.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think, like, if you go about the way in the places that you filmed in, you kind of mentioned a few of them already, but what is their significance, like, for you, because it's such a personal project, but also in your collaboration with Jazz? Like, what were the significant locations, if you...
Yeah. Like, for example, we used to hang a lot about, next to the river. Jazz lives in Victoria. And so we used to go down Vauxhall Bridge and chill by the river. For example, one of the scenes, the dark water, is filmed there. I filmed lots of bridges and trains, means of transportation, like the water. Also, because Jazz had a special relationship with water as a purifying element, that was one of his things. And for example, we just go explore. One time we found a mental health hospital, abandoned building, like really big, and it looks like a prison. Well, Jazz speaks about mental health institutions as also prisons. And so we filmed there, for example. Yeah, whatever gave meaning or...
Nice. So almost the process of making the film was also the process of developing the friendship or holding on to discovering each other.
Yes.
And that leads me, I guess, then to the enormous task, right? When you're just recording in this way, of editing it together. So how did you go about this task?
Also, I had made work in progress, and then so it went through stages. I guess I treated it as a poem. So I had all the sound recordings, for example. So I listen to all the sound recordings, and then I go through them, and then I pick, all the elements. And I think about all the things that, we're talking about and you want to treat. And then there's the images. And there's also texts I've written based on Jazz experiences sometimes, and even on my own experiences. So it was like a collage of all these elements together. And I worked with my mentor from Goldsmith, Graham Miller.
Who is here today?
I was here today. And that was also quite a journey, and also with Nikki Tomlinson. Yeah, it was really amazing working with Graham, because I also worked with him before, so we kind of understood. Yeah, and then we worked on the sound design.
Which is really beautiful, the sound design. So I don't know, Graham, maybe because we have this privilege, like it's such a tiny amount of people, we are like 4 people here, and we were lucky enough to bring Graham here.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be nice, how did you work with Umama on this project?
Take the mask off. I'll mask myself. Well, as Umama said, we worked together from Goldsmiths, and where Umama made an amazing performed film, a showing of her work called Hint, in which what you describe as this sort of special relationship with footage and the patience and being there was really manifest, and I absolutely loved that piece, and we developed a sort of trust and dialogue from there. And yeah, actually the number of layers, and Jazz's story is also you sometimes I didn't know whose story it was, and that's partly the intention. It was also just an incredible it was so layered, and the question was how to sort of figure it out. And in a funny way, as sort of sound designer and chipping in also with Nikki on trying to find structures through. It was always going to be a maze. It was always going to be layers. And a part of it was not wanting to lose these incredibly long, patient shots of being on bridges, watching seagulls beyond the boredom threshold. You know, that's the key thing. It's not about cutting, it's about staying with something, because it implies a kind of sense of place. And I think I have a real interest in place and sort of witnessing unwitnessed bits. I think it's a great film about London in a funny way. As a Londoner, it's changed my view of London. It chimes with my view of London, but knowing the backstory of it, there's a scene outside a pub watching the usual sort of drinking in the evening going on, and yet the sort of intense presence of Jazz and Umama together filming this thing. I see it from the outside. I see my own city. And so the sort of design and structuring went hand in hand, I think. And sometimes my job is just to sort of hold a space, help hold the space for long enough for it to become something else. So that the journey on the bus and referring backwards and forwards. It's a sort of imperfect structure that just ended up landing. I don't even know quite how we did it, but by lots of bits of paper on the floor and dialoguing and bringing in all these different registers, I think. And one really important register in it is this fact that both Umama and Jazz are kind of poets, so that they speak up and perform in an amazingly transformative way. And so you've got one extreme of this amazing verbal, visionary sort of material, and at the other extreme, the dead ordinary, rain on a bus window. And it was a great puzzle for that reason, to help untangle a bit.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, if you're talking about the kind of components of it and the kind of threads almost of different languages spoken, be it the poetic language, be it the vernacular, be it everyday, and in relationship to your own life, then in the relationship of the making of a life here, that is severely restricted because of the circumstances, and then going to a prestigious university and being amongst people who have no idea about these life experiences. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, like, what do you think is I mean, I think a lot about audience, but not audience in the terms of like how mainstream organizations view audiences, like we're going to reach out to, say, working class people, like, because I am one, right? I never feel addressed by them. So, and also what is working class, right? We are so different within all these layers, but the structures of movement are different for all of us.
Of course.
You know, and what is the knowing? Like, what is the kind of audience that you are hoping to speak to, with the knowing of the unknowing? I mean, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of the audience. Because if I think, I mean, if I think about the audience of Beirut, like, I mean, because I haven't been back to Beirut for so long, so or if I think about Western audience, for example, or it depends also, even Western, some people would not know, for example, about the Palestinian struggle. I mean, it depends also how much information and layers I then you would also connect to the film, really. But I wanted to touch anybody who can see it as well, whatever their background is. So I wasn't thinking about particular audience, but rather thinking about, like, I need to say this. So I don't know. I mean, I've had feedback from people, for example, from Lebanon who loved it as well and connected to it. and a very different feedback from other people who don't know anything about the Palestinian struggle, and it's interesting what everybody can see.
What I mean by audience, I think, is that if you would have thought of an audience in the kind of conventional way, you probably wouldn't have been able to make such a beautiful film. But now the kind of concept of audience is really radical, I feel like. This is just something I think a lot about now, because your film, because of the approach, because it's full of poetry, but it's also not avoiding the difficult questions. All of the things, like being Palestinian, not being able to live in Palestine any longer, being already a stranger in the place of your birth because you're in a refugee camp, being like triple estranged and triple strange made, but also then I feel like, but still being a human being with everything that comes with being a human being, and have the right to dream and have the right to be a poet, right, and have the right to be expressed. So in a way, by being able to share this film in the way in which you've made it with different audiences, that's a radical act, I feel. Like a very beautiful radical act. For me, that's conceptually very strong.
Yes, and also for me, the film came as a result of the lived thing. I didn't decide, oh, I'm gonna go make a film. And that's been the way I work, because I really get inspired by things around me or what's happening, and then, okay, what's the tool, what's the thing that's good? And of course, I'm in love with film and cinema, but I never studied as well, so I'm self-taught in a way. But it was like, I think it's the circumstances that I found myself in which is more important. Like, for example, I wouldn't go and say, okay, I want to make a film about a Palestinian, or I don't think I would have done a film like this. It's just, it was the moment, and I wouldn't think about making something like this. It's just, things were there, and I was in it, and I thought, okay, I have to do it, this is the way. So I didn't think about the audience, but rather about the thing itself. Yes, and again, I just wanted to capture life as it is.
So you made a film with and through and because you had to, and because your poetry became attached to your life.
The everyday,
to the everyday.
It's the everyday.
And I think this is again like this thing which I find also deeply troubling, is when we make films, or when people make films about, and they tell the story about, without ever making films with and through the uncomfortable circumstances.
Exactly.
Because your circumstances were.
And that's how it happened, because I first made it, I didn't want to, I was just, okay, let me make with jazz. And then I thought, no, it's about me and jazz. I wanted just the truth, or the things as they are.
So, because you've made this film, are you in touch with jazz, and like, how's your relationship?
Yes, he's my best friend. Yeah.
What does he think of the film?
He loves it. It's what he says. There's only certain things that we had, discussion about, and then he wanted to remove, and then I convinced him, and that's the only thing. But even the film, it became so symbolic to our friendship and to the whole journey. And it wasn't nice all the time. There were, for me it was hard how to carry it, because I'm carrying my best friend's story. So it's not like, oh, I'm making a film about a character. And that's why it felt I had to be in it, because it's about our friendship. It's not about, so again, it's with him. It's not about him.
But I think this is the thing, like, because I feel also very drawn, like, I think how I make films is very much from, they're emotionally very difficult for me, right? Because I'm going into a really difficult place with also the people I work with, and my own life has loads of different things.
I'm so inspired by your films.
But like, I feel like the responsibility, therefore, you have, and you must feel also for. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you negotiated it with yourself?
I just, to be honest, I felt scared at the beginning, and worried for a long time if I'm able to, how to portray the image and how to speak about these things. So it was delicate, but I was very transparent with jazz all the time. and involving him with whatever I'm doing, so he can, you know, because I felt it's fair. I guess that's the way I dealt with it. You know, whatever things. Also, it was like a real friendship, and the whole journey together. It was just not just a film. Yeah, yeah.
But I feel like this is what struck me so much when I first saw it, and you can see and sense that there's a relationship, not just in the film, but also that goes into
spiritual, I believe, as well. Yeah, because me and Jazz also, we share, I mean, this whole experience of being cut away from home and going deeply thinking about things together. Yeah, I'm really touched by his wisdom on and his philosophy on life as well. So I guess, yeah, it comes from a place of searching for something and understanding something together, processing something together, and maybe that reflects in the film.
So you kind of wrote a poem together.
Yes.
The film.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So, and then I think like maybe one of the things would be nice to talk about is like how then the film was finished, and I just want to also add to what Graham said. But in your sound design, what I really loved about it so much in fact that we are now working on a piece with Graham together because of that. But there's like an otherworldliness to it that is sparse. That is sparse and powerful because it's not overpowering, right? Like, and you've made this throughout the whole piece. I feel like there's never, you have very, you're a presence, but you're not overpowering presence, and neither is Jazz, who is also a huge presence, but neither of you cancel each other out.
It's like a dance.
Yeah, it's very, very beautiful, and I feel like that is the same thing happened with the sound design. It's allowing for the dance. It's almost like a wind, and there's, I can't remember who said that.
But also working with Graham on that, in that sense, was really magical, because that's why Graham understood, you know, the whole process, and that's why it was beautiful, and it was in a way personal. So he was in tune to all the things that are happening around the film as well. So we talked and then experimented in doing stuff, and it was just like magic being created. That's how I felt, at least at the time. Yeah.
There's somebody who I can't now remember who it was, but talked about like a sense of home, because I feel like in your film you're describing or you're searching for a sense of home that is not dependent upon an actual house, because it can't be, right? So, but somebody talked about like a sense of home being like a nest which is made out of strings, a bit plastic bag, a cup, a discarded cigarette butt, and then some twigs that are cut from the tree, right?
So literally the film was my home for some time. I mean, that was like kind of my anchor, because it was like, okay, there's nothing around. So it's like the nest I built at that time.
But you built the nest with the stuff without making it too neat. Like the nest has all the elements that are in your life.
Yeah.
Like.
And maybe because I'm not a trained filmmaker, so I just followed my instinct, and I was learning throughout the process and just experimenting, really.
Yeah, see, I'm not a trained filmmaker
with the elements.
Either. Yeah. So maybe that's our luck.
Yeah. Because otherwise I'd be very restricted and thinking what I can say and what to do, and
but this is what I was trying to
all
get
the
at.
science of it. And
no, but with the idea of audience, so not audiences in audience studies, but the idea of like, who are we making for? Because I do believe that sometimes work it's not for everyone, and I feel like you have to be true to yourself, and and then the audience will also find itself, because maybe they encounter something they might not feel so comfortable with, or haven't encountered yet in this way, and instead of saying like, oh, I don't want to see something that doesn't have that kind of language expression, I'm actually open to allow myself to go with a poem in a different structure that I have not encountered.
And exploring the way the poem that leads you to be, or the thing, without imposing on it. That's kind of how I worked, maybe, because I just let everything flow, and it was all observational and just watching, and then, like picking up elements that you feel.
And what is the next project you're working on? And what have you learned from this, I guess, to work in the next?
I think I found the title, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Homeless Forever. Well, that's Muhammad's. How can I speak about the new project? It's I started also working on it since 2018, and it will be a film. Yeah.
What I really love about us and getting to know you a little bit more, I take 10 years. The shortest film was like 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're the same.
Yes.
It just takes what it takes.
Yes.
That's
it
what
takes
it
time.
takes.
Yeah.
So because we have to round up now, and I just want to thank you for doing this talk. And I want to also say to everybody, this is, you know, it's hard to speak in public, even though this is kind of semi-public. But to learn in oneself to say what means, because as a maker, you make the work. That's the speaking about how one feels. And then to translate it into a different language, i.e. in this kind of conversations, it's not easy. And I really appreciate that you're...
Thank you so much.
That we found the courage together to do that. And I want to thank you because I know it's, you know, it will grow, but also people can undo a lot by talking. And I think sometimes the work is the work.
Yes.
But I think people wanted to hear your process because it's a beautiful process, and I really believe in it very much. And your work it's awesome. So
thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much indeed, Umama and Andrea. Really a wonderful conversation. So please do find the film on Akka's Shore. Following this conversation, of course, available until Friday, 12 noon. If you're watching this archived online, then do please obviously enjoy the conversation and keep an eye out for Umama and Andrea's work elsewhere. Really a wonderful conversation to start our new live stream project here at Whitechapel Gallery. And many, many thanks indeed for your attention. I'd just like to thank again, of course, our wonderful technicians, our technical director, Sam, our technicians on the ground here, Ralph and Chris, for their keen attention, of course, to the delivery of this event. Please do, as I said at the beginning, support the Whitechapel in all the ways that you know how to. This is part of an ongoing public programmes project here at Whitechapel Gallery called Ways of Knowing, tied in to each of the main gallery projects here at the public event side of the Whitechapel Gallery project. We are alongside now Eileen Agar's show, and we are thinking about fluidity and water. And this will continue through each season with particular thematic focus attached to the exhibitions and running through all that we do here in the Public Programmes Department. Many, many thanks indeed for being with us. Thanks to everyone, my colleagues in the department and everyone else at Whitechapel Gallery. Thank you for being with us, and goodbye.